Check this out, BCM Raider here, bringing you another Commander deck tech, and today we have a very special one. We have Hope Estheim from the Final Fantasy set. We're in the Azorious colors, and this is a Soul Sisters life gain mill control build. At the beginning of our end step, each opponent will mill X cards, where X is the amount of life we gain this turn. So our primary focus is gain lots of life, draw many cards, and hopefully mill our opponents out as fast as possible. So, let's get right into this. First up are all the creatures. So we have our Soul Sisters. So we have Soul's Attendant. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, we gain 1 life. Of course, we have Soul Warden. We have Ariok Champion. This is protection from black and red, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield, we get to gain a life. And what are we going to do with all this life? We have probably the best 1-drop in Commander with Serra Ascended. This is a 1/1 with lifelink, but as long as we have 30 or more life, because the starting life total in Commander is 40, this will automatically be a 6/6 with flying. Of course, we have Halia. This is a newer one. This is a Soul Sister ability as well. Whenever Halia or another creature or artifact enters the battlefield, we gain 1 life. And then at the beginning of our end step, we get to draw a card if we gain 3 or more life that turn. So she's going to synergize by gaining life and drawing cards. She also has a warp ability where you can cast her for 1 white mana and then she'll gain haste. Then we have to exile it at the end of turn and we can cast that at a later time. Now we have some creatures that are going to synergize with everything we're doing. So we have Enduring Curiosity. This is a 4/3 with flash, and whenever any creature we control deals combat damage, we get to draw a card. And if Enduring Curiosity, when it's a creature, is put into a graveyard, we get to return it back to the battlefield as an enchantment. Similar to that, we have Enduring Innocence. This is a 2/1 with lifelink, and whenever 1 or more creatures with power 2 or less enters the battlefield, we get to draw a card. That only triggers once per turn though. We have Heliod Suncrowned. This is not a creature unless your devotion is less than 5. And whenever we gain life, we get to put a +1 counter on target creature or enchantment we control, or we can pay a colorless and a white, and target creature will gain lifelink until the end of turn. We have Walking Ballista. This also goes infinite with Heliod, because if Walking Ballista had 2 counters on it, we can give Walking Ballista a lifelink. We can remove a counter to deal 1 damage to any target. Then we'll gain a life. Because we gained a life, we can put a +1 counter on target creature. We're going to put the +1 counter back on Walking Ballista and repeat this process as many times as possible. Now we have Drogskull Reaver. This is a 3/5 with flying, double strike, and lifelink, and a static ability. Anytime we gain life, we get to draw a card. And if our life total is high enough, we have Felidar Sovereign. This is a 4/6 with vigilance and lifelink, and at the beginning of our upkeep, if we have 40 or more life, we win the game. Now we have some creatures that are going to deal with all our opponent's creatures and pretty much what they do. So we have Ruin Crab. This is an 0/3 with landfall, so anytime a land enters the battlefield, each opponent will mill 3 cards. Of course, we have Esper Sentinel. Whenever a opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, we get to draw a card unless they pay X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. So if we have Heliod, we can put +1 counters on Esper Sentinel to make his power even bigger, so our opponents can't pay that tax. Now we have Grand Abolisher. During our turn, your opponents cannot cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. This is a good way to lock out our opponents from pretty much interacting with us. And because we're milling, why not make it even more egregious with Bruvak the Grand Eloquent? If a opponent would mill 1 or more cards, they mill twice that many instead. Now we have good old Loran of the Third Path. He's going to enter the battlefield, and then we get to destroy any target artifact or enchantment. When you activate her, both you and target opponent will draw a card. Now we have Grand Arbiter Augustine IV. Our white spells will cost 1 colorless less to play. Our blue spells will cost 1 colorless less to play, and all spells your opponents play will cost 1 more to cast. Of course, we have Windborn Muse. This is kind of like a propaganda or ghostly prison on a creature. It's also a 2/3 flyer, so she can block flyers pretty well. Now we have what's called a MDFC with Witch Enchanter. When it enters the battlefield, we get to destroy target artifact or enchantment, or you can play it as a land. And probably the most important one is Consecrated Sphinx. Anytime a opponent would draw a card, you may draw 2 cards. We do have some very powerful planeswalkers that are really going to help us out here. And probably my personal favorite is Teferi Time Raveler. For the low cost of a colorless, a white, and a blue, he'll enter with 4 loyalty counters on him, but he has the static ability where each opponent can only cast spells as sorceries. So it's going to shut down most cascade spells, your opponents from casting counter spells, or pretty much doing anything on your turn. But you can +1 them until your next turn. You can cast a sorcery as though it was an instant. Or if you need to get rid of something or protect something of yours, you can -3 and return up to 1 target artifact, creature, or enchantment back to its owner's hand, and you get to draw a card. And because we're going to force our opponents to draw or prevent them from drawing additional cards, we have Narset, Parter of Veils. She'll enter with 5 loyalty counters on her. Each opponent cannot draw more than 1 card each turn, or we can -2 her to look at the top 4 cards of our library, reveal a non-creature, non-land card, and put that into our hand. Now we have the original Jace the Mind Sculptor. This is a very powerful planeswalker. He'll enter with 3 loyalty counters on him. You can +2 him to look at the top card of target player's library. You can choose to leave that card on top or put it on the bottom. And for 0, we get to Brainstorm. We get to draw 3 cards, then put 2 from our hand back on top in any order. Or if you need to get rid of a creature, you can -1 them to return a creature back to its owner's hand. You can target your own thing, or -12, you get to exile all cards from target player's library, then they shuffle their hand into their library, and that becomes their library. Now we have Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. He'll enter with 4 loyalty counters on him. You can +1 him to draw a card, then at your end step, you get to untap 2 lands. Or -3, you get to put target non-land permanent into its owner's library 3rd from the top. This is going to be good when you need to deal with a very certain permanent. That way you can get it off the battlefield, put it back into your opponent's library. That way you can mill it so they can't draw it. At -8, you get an emblem. Whenever you draw a card, you can exile target permanent a opponent controls. Now we have Teferi Temporal Pilgrim. He'll enter with 4 loyalty counters on him, and the static effect, anytime you draw a card, you get to put a loyalty counter on Teferi. You can 0 him to draw a card, or -2, you get to create a 2/2 blue spirit creature token with anytime you draw a card, you put a +1 counter on that creature. And then -12, target opponent will choose a permanent they control and return it back to their hand. Then they shuffle each non-land permanent they control into its owner's library. Okay, let's get into the instants. Most of these are just going to protect what we're trying to do or deal with anything our opponents do. Of course, we have Brainstorm. That way we can draw 3 cards, then put 2 from our hand back on top in any order. Now we have Mystical Tutor. This will allow us to search our library for any instant or sorcery card, and that card is put on top of our library. Now we have Enlightened Tutor. We're going to search our library for any artifact or enchantment card, and that card is put on top of our library. This is a good way to search out a very specific enchantment that we're going to use just by drawing cards, but I'll touch on that in just a second. We need to protect everything, so we have Teferi's Protection. Until our next turn, our life total cannot change. We gain protection from everything, and all permanents will phase out. Now we have a couple counter spells. So we have an Offer You Can't Refuse. You get to counter target non-creature spell, and its controller will create 2 treasure tokens. We can even counter our own spell if we really need to, if we need those 2 treasure tokens. Of course, we have Counterspell. We have Arcane Denial. Arcane Denial is very good in this build because not only are we drawing a card, but our opponents will be forced to draw 2 cards as well. And you get to counter the spell. Now we have Shadowbringers, or Dovin's Veto. This spell cannot be countered, and we're going to counter target non-creature spell. Because Hope Estheim is a very low-costing commander, we have Fierce Guardianship. As long as we control our commander, we can cast Fierce Guardianship without paying its mana cost. We're going to counter target non-creature spell. Now we have some removal for our opponent's stuff. So we have Swords to Plowshares. We're not running Path to Exile for the simple fact of we don't want to give our opponents the option of searching for any kind of land. And if things really go awry, we have Cyclonic Rift. For 2 mana, we can return any non-land permanent we don't control, or if we pay 7, we're going to return each non-land permanent we do not control. Now we have a very good one. We have Commit/Memory. If you cast Commit, you get to put target spell or non-land permanent on top of its owner's library, second from the top. Or if we cast Memory as a sorcery from our graveyard for 6 mana, each player will shuffle their hand and graveyard into their library and then draw 7 cards. Now we have Heliod's Intervention. Depending on the state of the game, we can choose to destroy X target artifacts or enchantments, or target player will gain twice X life. So if we have a lot of mana lying around, we probably just want to gain as much life as possible. That way our opponents will mill that many. Now we have Beacon of Immortality. We're going to double target player's life total, and Beacon of Immortality will shuffle itself back in. Now we have Blue Sun Zenith. For 3 blue and X, depending on how much we pay into X, target player will draw X cards. Either we can draw lots of cards, or we can force our opponents to draw lots of cards. And then Blue Sun Zenith will shuffle itself back in as well. Okay, let's get into the sorceries. There's not very many sorceries, but the ones we are playing are going to be very beneficial for what we're doing. So we have Maddening Cacophony. This costs 2, or you can pay its kicker, and each opponent will mill 8 cards. If you kick this spell, each opponent will mill half their library rounded up. Now we have Echo of Aeons. Each player will shuffle their hand and graveyard back in and then draw 7 cards. This also has flashback, so we can cast it again from our graveyard. And because we're playing Narset Powder of Veils, all these kind of wheel effects are going to be very good, because we're going to draw way more cards than our opponents. So why not have Windfall? Each player will discard their hand, and then they're going to draw equal to the greatest number of cards discarded this way. Now we have some removal. So we have Supreme Verdict. This spell cannot be countered, and we're going to destroy all creatures. Now we have my personal favorite with Farewell. We can choose 1 or more. We can exile all artifacts, creatures, enchantments, or graveyards. Now we have Approach to the Second Sun. This is pretty much just a one-sided win condition because we're going to be drawing lots of cards. When we cast it the first time, we're going to put Approach of the Second Sun 7th from the top. Then we gain 7. So we can get down to casting this the second time just to win the game. Okay, let's get into the artifacts. We have our Soul Ring, our Arcane Signet, our Thought Vessel, and Talisman of Progress as our mana rocks. Now we have a fun one. We have Elixir of Immortality. Besides just gaining 5 life, we're going to shuffle our graveyard and Elixir back into our library. That way we can continually draw all these very powerful spells and protect our life total. Now we have Midnight Clock. This will tap for a blue mana, but we can pay 2 colors and a blue. We get to put an hour counter on it, and every single upkeep, we put an hour counter on Midnight Clock. And when there's 12 counters, we get to shuffle our hand and graveyard back in and then draw 7 cards. Now, to protect ourselves even more, we have the One Ring. When this enters the battlefield, if we cast it, we're going to gain protection from everything until our next turn. And every single upkeep, we lose 1 life for each burden counter that we put on the One Ring. But we're going to activate this. We're going to put a burden counter on the One Ring. Then we draw a card for each burden counter that's on the One Ring. Now we have some artifacts that are going to synergize with everything we're doing. Because we're gaining life, we have the Wind Crystal. Our white spells will cost 1 colorless less to cast. If we gain life, we gain twice that life instead. And then for 4 colorless and 2 white, creatures we control will gain flying and lifelink. And because we're milling, we have the Water Crystal. Our blue spells will cost 1 colorless less to cast. And then if a opponent would mill 1 or more cards, they mill that many cards plus 4. And we can pay 4 and 2 blue. Each opponent will mill cards equal to the number of cards in our hand. So the more cards we have in our hand, the more our opponents are going to mill. Now we have a fun one. We have Jester's Cap. We're going to pay 2 colors to activate this. Then we sacrifice Jester's Cap. Then we get to search target player's library for 3 specific cards and then exile them. We can do a lot with this card. If our opponents decided to put a very certain card on top of their library, we can force them to shuffle that away, or we can just completely rip out 3 very important win conditions that our opponents have. Now we have Alhammaret's Archive. This has a static effect for both abilities of what we're doing. If we would gain life, we gain twice that life instead. And if we would draw a card, except the first one we draw 2 cards instead. Okay, let's get into the enchantments. All these enchantments are going to synergize with drawing cards or gaining life. Or pretty much just lock out our opponents from doing pretty much anything. So first up, we have Authority of the Consuls. Creatures our opponent's control will enter the battlefield tapped, and whenever a creature enters the battlefield under their control, we get to gain a life. Of course, we have Rhystic Study. Anytime our opponent plays a spell, we get to draw a card unless they pay 1. And because we're going to be drawing less cards, we have Sphinx's Tutelage. Anytime we draw a card, target opponent will mill 2 cards. If 2 non-land cards share a color with the milled cards, they repeat this process. This, with the Water Crystal, will ultimately force them to mill 6 cards every time we draw a card, and chances are there's going to be 2 colors that match, so they're going to repeat this process many times. It's a very good synergy, and if we really need to, we can pay 6, draw a card, then discard a card. And because we like drawing cards, we have Teferi's Tutelage. When it enters the battlefield, we get to draw a card, then discard, and then anytime we draw a card, target opponent will mill 2 cards. Now, to prevent our opponents from ever attacking us, because we are running Windborn Muse, which is basically Ghostly Prison, we have Ghostly Prison itself. Creatures can't attack us unless they pay 2 colors for each attacking creature. Similar to that, we have Propaganda. So if we have all 3 of these effects, it's going to cost our opponents 6 colorless mana for every single creature that wants to attack us. And because we're going to force our opponents to draw cards, we have Smothering Tithe. Anytime a opponent would draw a card, we get to create a treasure token unless they pay 2 colors. And because we love drawing cards, we have Teferi's Ageless Insight. If we would draw a card except the first one we draw in each of our draw steps, we get to draw 2 cards instead. Okay, let's get into the land base. We have our Command Tower, our Flooded Strand. That way we can search for any plains or island card. We have Fabled Passage. That way we can go get any plains or island. Of course, we have Hallowed Fountain. Meticulous Archive. When this enters, we get to Surveil. Now we have Irrigated Farmland. This will tap for both colors, and it'll enter tapped, but we can cycle this if we just need to draw a card. Now we have Prairie Stream. This will enter tapped unless we control 2 or more basics. Now we have Idyllic Beachfront. This will enter tapped, but it is fetchable. Now we have Flood Farm Verge. This will tap for a white, but you can tap for a blue as long as you control a plains or an island. Now we have our Filter Land with Mystic Gate. We have Temple of Enlightenment. When this enters, it'll enter tapped. We get to scry 1. Now we have Port Town. This will enter tapped unless we reveal a plains or an island card from our hand. Now we have Nimbus Maze. This is kind of like Flood Farm Verge. It'll tap for colorless, but we can tap for a white as long as we control an island, or it'll tap for a blue as long as we control a plains. Now we have our speed land with Seachrome Coast. The first 3 turns, this will enter untapped. Anything after that, it'll enter tapped. Now we have Deserted Beach. This will enter tapped the first 3 turns. Now we have Restless Anchorage. This will enter tapped. It'll tap for blue or white, but we can activate it and it'll become a 2/3 blue bird with flying. And whenever that creature attacks, we get to create a map token. Now we have our Henge pathway. We can choose to play this on the blue side or the white side. Now we have the original cycling lands. So we have Secluded Steppe and Lonely Sandbar. Now we have some utility lands that are really going to synergize with either drawing cards or creating creatures as blockers that will trigger all of the Soul Sisters. So we have Jador Aristocratic Capital. This will enter tapped. It'll tap for a blue, but it also has an adventure. For 4 colorless and 2 blue, target opponent will mill half their library rounded down. Now we have Castle Vantress. This will enter tapped unless we control an island. It'll tap for a blue mana, or we can pay 2 colorless and 2 blue, then we get to scry 2. Now we have Castle Ardenvale. This will enter tapped unless we control planes, but we can pay 2 colorless and 2 white to create a 1/1 white human token. So we can make blockers with this and build a little army. Now, because we're drawing lots of cards, we want to keep all those cards in our hand. So we have Reliquary Tower, and because most of the permanents we have, such as Planeswalkers, will enter with counters on them, we have Karn's Bastion. That way we can pay 4 colorless and proliferate. Now we have Fountain Port. This is a very, very good land. It'll tap for a colorless, or we can pay 2 colorless, activate it, sacrifice a token to draw a card, or we can pay 3, pay 1 life, and create a 1/1 blue fish token, or we can pay 4, create a treasure. Now we have Gyre Reach Sanitarium. We're going to force everybody to draw cards when they don't want to. We're going to pay 2 colors. Each player will draw a card, then discard. We have 4 planes and 4 islands. And that was the Commander deck tech for Hope Estheim. I really hope you guys enjoyed this Draw Mill Soul Sister Life Gain build. This deck is very streamlined. It's very fun. But if you guys have any suggestions on how to improve this build, let me know in the comments below. I'll leave the link to the Moxfield deck list in the comments below as well. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share these videos, and I will see you guys in the next one.